This is the lumber that is going to make up the legs of the table. So this is walnut. This is 8/4, so which is 2 inches thick. And I'm going to have to mill this. Now there's a couple things that I've needed to consider as I'm thinking about how I'm going to mill this lumber. Number one is the grain direction. So as you can see, what I've done is I've taken some chalk and I've kind of laid out the grain direction on both sides of the boards so I can understand which way the grain is going. On the ends of the boards here, I've done the same thing. So you can see that, for example, this board is fairly straight across. This one's got a little concave grain in it, and then these two are kind of just wacky. So, you know, this is all things that we need to consider when we start milling this lumber, running it through our jointer and our planer, so we don't get tear out as we do it, right? So what we'll want to do with this board, for example, is probably run it through this end first into the joiner so that the blades go with the grain and not against the grain so they don't tear the grain out. Okay, so those are some things to consider. Another thing that I need to consider is the fact that this board here, for example, is, I believe, 7 3/4, 7 3/4. These are about, yeah, these are 5. And the problem that I have is I have a 6 and an 1/8 inch jointer. Now, a lot of you watching this video right now are going to start posting comments saying, where is your safety device on that jointer? But what I did earlier is I did kind of a no-no here. I took a practice board that was wider than the jointer. Get all my stuff out of the way. And I jointed it using a method, I can't remember who it was. I'll post the link to his site, to his post. But it was how to joint a wood that's wider than your jointer. And it worked out really well. It involves a sled that you eventually place on your planer, so you can in fact joint a board that's wider than your jointer, and then you run it on this plate that goes into your planer, and you plane the wider side. And then when you're done with that, you'll have a flat side, the width of the board, and then you simply flip it over and plane down the extension that was overlapping from your jointer. Sounds like a lot, but I'll put a link in the comments here. The thing is, I really am safety conscious, so I'm very nervous about doing it this way without the safety fence or device on my jointer. The only other option I have then is to come over here and rip these beautiful wide boards before I joint them. You know, I really hate doing that because it's such beautiful wood. So I'm not sure which way I'm going to do it yet, but we'll figure out something. You know, safety's really good. And I'll probably need someone to help me with these if I'm going to do the whole length. What I may do, and I haven't thought that far ahead yet, I may go ahead and cut these up because eventually they're going to be 4 legs that are a foot wide. Okay, so each leg is a foot wide, and each leg is going to be about 28 inches long, because then the tabletop's an extra 1.5 inches, that takes it up to 29.5. I'm going to put some levelers on the bottom. That'll take it up to about a 30-inch height table overall. Okay, so just wanted to kind of let you know these are some of my thoughts as I'm going through this, and I'll probably joint these 2 narrow ones first and see how all that goes, and then we'll tackle the big ones, and I'll let you know what I decided to do on those. Okay, so here's the first milling. What I did is I took one of the narrow pieces, so it was a piece like this, cut it in half so it would be easier to work with. And then this is the first piece that's been milled. Look at the grain on this wood. I mean, it's just gorgeous. You know, once we get this finished, sanded, it's going to be just a beautiful table. So again, you know, this is about 2 inches thick. I'll continue to mill these down so they're all the same width. But for right now, this is just the rough milling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and video the milling of the next piece, just so you can see everything that goes into that. Okay, so here we are at the jointer. I want to enclose the garage doors so you could see it a little better. I'm going to adjust the camera here, and we're going to do this next board. Now this board here, as you can see, remember what we talked about with the grain. You know, the grain is going this way, so we want to joint this with the board coming in like this, so the blades are going with the grain and not against the grain. Still have a little bit right here and a little bit on the end here. Almost through there. Over there. As you can see here, there's no more chop. That's good. Edges are good. I'm going to run it through one more time just to make sure. Got one edge. Now we're going to do one side, now we're going to do one of the edges. I'm looking at this, and I think I want to do, I'm looking at the grain here. If I do this edge here, I'm going to be going with the grain. If I did this, I'd be going against the grain. You don't want that, right? This one looks like it's kind of weird the way it's going, so let's do this edge first. Turn it off. You got a smooth edge here. Let's go ahead and check this. I need a magnetic level here, kind of just a little level. Looks really good. Really good. So now what we have is we have two sides jointed, right? We got this side, we're going to mark them. That's good. That's good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this board over to the planer, and we're going to plane this side. Remember, coming through this way with the grain. Okay? This last side here. Let's go to the table saw. And we've got this one edge right here, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take that off. I just want to see roughly, and we're still going to consider this pretty much rough cut, right? So at the end down here we've got about 4 15/16. Up here we've got about 5 1/16. So it's basically just, that's about 5 1/16, about 5 1/16, and so it looks like right about here is where it tapers in a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I want to set this to where I'm just taking off a blade, That's all I'm doing. I'm basically going to take off about a blade, right? We're not getting particular here because we still have to get all these cut. Then we're going to lay them side by side. We're going to figure out what's going to make our 1 foot wide legs, and then we'll cut, rip if we have to. We'll do everything we need to do to make everything fit together, okay? So let's go ahead and take care of this one. We're going to put a mark on here. So done, done. This piece is done. All right, well, before we call it quits today, I just wanted to show you what we accomplished. So we did mill all the lumber to what I say medium mill. So you can see we still have ends that we're going to need to consider and all that. But then what I did is I laid out the boards according to the patterns that I liked, and I marked them. So this is set 1, here's set 2, set 3, and set 4. And then next weekend when I go to put them all together, each one of the legs will look like this. So it's roughly a foot wide, you know, about 2 inches thick, and that's what the legs look like. Okay, we're back in the shop. I'm going to start assembling the legs. Now I'm going to use biscuits here, and really the only reason I'm going to use biscuits is so I can get things lined up properly. The glue itself would give a really good bond, but I'm going to use biscuits so we can, you know, align the boards properly. Now I did do one more pass on the jointer, especially with this one and this one, because I had the table saw edges up against each other, and I was getting a little bit of a gap in there. So I went ahead back with the jointer, and now I've got a good smooth seam here. All right, I already glued one up. Let's glue up the second one. So we're going to wipe these down. Get ready. And I'm going to dry fit them first just to make sure that the biscuit holes are deep enough, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to get glue and everything on this and then all of a sudden you realize that your biscuits aren't deep enough, or they're not lining up and they're leaving gaps. So make sure that we're okay here. That looks pretty good. And remember, we're going to cut to length, so they're not perfectly cut. So we don't care about that. Everything looks like it's lining up, so we're looking good. I am using the Type Bond dark wood glue because you know, it's just a good glue for this darker walnut. Got my crossbars ready. Okay, so let's run some glue on this thing. All right, well, our job for today was to get 2 legs glued up. So we've got 1, 2 glued up. We're going to glue up 2 more tomorrow. All right, so finally we have all 4 legs done. They're milled, they're sanded, they are cut to length, and they're ready to be finished.
Hoho! Scheiße, wo ist mein Theater? Mit der Boss! Hoho! Scheiße, wo ist mein Theater?